We're studying in the book of Job, and we are down to Job chapter 21 in our study. See that Joe is handing out some outlines. I've sent those out digitally, but we always have some hard copies in the back in case you miss those digitally. The section that we are looking at right now is chapters 19 through 22, where Job first speaks, then Zophar gives his second answer to Job, and then Job speaks again, and then Eliphaz gives his third answer. We looked at Job's first answer and Zophar's response to him in our study last week. Just a review of what Zophar said in Job chapter 20, because typically what happens is one of these men will give a speech and then Job will answer that. And then the next will come and answer him. And so it's just kind of a recurring thing where these men are not so much talking to one another as talking past one another. Making arguments that I think most of them, they all agree with, but making wrong application of those things that they agree with. They all agree that what's happened to Job is unfortunate for him, but there is a disagreement on what exactly that means. That Job is going through these difficulties. And the three friends have made the point that Job is going through these difficulties because of his sin. Job's answer to them over and over and over again, if that is the case, I have no idea what I did that would cause this kind of thing to happen to me. The answer to that would be, Job, you sinned, and you need to confess that sin. And Job's answer again would be, there's nothing to confess. I haven't done anything that is worthy of this. And so Zophar has spoken a familiar refrain in chapter 20. He says that Job has said things that are dishonorable to him and to his two friends. And then he gives another one of these understandings of the condemnation of the wicked. The wicked have violated God's will, and God will not allow them to get away from that condemnation. And so what Job is suffering at this time is a result of sin. He notes in verses 4 through 11 that since the beginning of time, the prosperity of the wicked has been destroyed because of their wickedness and their arrogance. And so Zophar, at least now, and this is kind of a little bit of a concession by him, that yes, there are some short periods of time when the wicked might prosper, but it is very short. And because of their arrogance and the blessings that they have been given, they are plunged then into misery. Verses 12 through 16, wickedness is a tasty meal for them. It tastes good while they're eating it, but it goes down and turns sour. He says it's like a cobra's venom. It eventually destroys them. Verses 17 through 19, Job has asked for his friends to get specific with him. You know, it's one thing to just issue these generalities. You know, you have sinned, and so they keep pressing that point that Job, this has come upon you because of your sin. And so Job has asked them, you know, what have I done? What kind of a sin would bring this upon me? And so Job asks for it, and Zophar gives it to him. You gained what you had illicitly, You've oppressed the poor. You've violently seized houses from people. And what God is doing with Job now is making sure that he's not able to enjoy all of this ill-gotten gain. Now, Zophar has nothing that he can show that would prove what he is accusing Job of. And he knows that. His intention is not to prove his point. His intention is to make the point that, Job, this is what you have done. And it's obvious that you have done these kind of things, because these are the kind of things that will bring the punishment of God upon men. Eliphaz is going to make the same kind of arguments later on. And it's interesting to me. I got to thinking about it this afternoon. This is before the Old Testament, the Mosaic law. Go over to chapter 22, and there Eliphaz makes the point about he's taken pledges from your brother for no reason. That sounds Mosaical, doesn't it? What Moses said they could not do. But even in Job's time, and I suspect Job probably prophesied, or Job lived, 400 or 500 years maybe, before Moses came on the scene and gave to the children of Israel the Mosaic law. And yet here is this principle that was part of the patriarchal law, that you didn't mistreat the poor. You didn't steal houses from people. You didn't remove landmarks that staked people's property. You didn't neglect those who even needed a drink of water. And there are a lot of these things in these passages that we see repeated both in the Mosaic law and in the law, in the gospel, in the law of Christ. And so there has been a standard from God that's been true in every system that he has established, patriarchal, Mosaic, and the gospel system. And that is, you do not mistreat those who are less fortunate than yourself. You do not make illicit gain. And so Zophar is saying that it's obvious that those are the kinds of things that Job has done. Now, in chapter 20, verses 4 through 29, Zophar just piles it on. Like the prodigal son in Luke 15, 13 through 14, Job has consumed all of his gain in selfish living. His evil has made him destitute. And so God's wrath has attacked him like a weapon of war. Job, as we saw at the end of our study last week, appealed to heaven and earth to say that he was not guilty, that he had done nothing wrong, and to explain, let heaven and earth explain to me why it is that I'm going through these things. And Zophar's answer to him is, heaven and earth are speaking right now. If they were able to verbalize what the situation is, they would tell you that you are going through the pain that you are going through because of your sin. You are going through what is the heritage of every wicked person. And so Zophar has presented what his friends Eliphaz and Bildad have been saying throughout this, and that is, the wicked suffer, the righteous do not suffer. Now, Job he's kind of agreed with that, but in chapter 21, he's going to take it in a different direction.
I was going to say, at one point on chapter 20, the one that sticks out to me that is definitely something that he, I'll say it's a warning for us today, but in verse 22, in his self-sufficiency, he will be in distress, that we're blessed with many things, and many people in this world are blessed with many things, but also we don't ever need to get so full of ourselves that we have those things because we think we did it ourselves.
Yeah, and that is part of,
self-sufficiency.
that's part of that arrogance, isn't it? That we made it ourselves, and we have arrived because of ourselves and not anybody else. And chapter 20 is reflective of all of these things that these men have been saying. There's an element of truth to what they are saying in the general sense.
Yeah, they're
Does
just
it-
misapplying it.
Yeah. Does it normally go better for the righteous than for the wicked? Yes, it normally does. Is that a hard and fast rule? Well, Job's about to answer that. These men are saying that's hard and that's fast. God does not deviate from that. The wicked suffer, the righteous are blessed. No deviation. And if there was any deviation, then that would make God unjust. So as Job answers that in chapter 21, he asks them, first of all, he really makes 4 requests of them in the first 6 verses. And the first request is to listen carefully to my speech. Listen carefully to my speech. I think Job understands that these men have not really been listening to him, which is a cardinal sin in trying to sympathize with somebody, in trying to comfort somebody in the agony that they're going through, to not listen to what they are saying. It is not at all untypical for a person who is going through suffering to just want to, they want a shoulder to lean on. They want somebody to listen and to sympathize with the things that they are going through. What Job has met with in these 3 men are men who seem incapable of truly sympathizing. They have turned this into a theological discussion. And so they are trying to figure this out rather than saying to Job. And as we come to the end there in chapter 25, Bildad gives a little short speech that's just about useless. And as that ends, you're hit with, what haven't they done? What have they not said? Well, they haven't said, let's pray about this. They haven't said, let's see if we can help you to persuade God to give you a reason for why you are suffering. And they haven't said, I'm sorry for the pain that you are going through. Now that's too little theology there. They want to figure this thing out. And so I think that plea in chapter 21 and verse 2, listen carefully to my speech, emphasis on carefully. You sat there in silence and listened to what I said, but I really need you to focus on what I'm saying. Bear with me that I may speak. And then the second request, and after I have spoken, keep mocking. I think his point there is hold off judgment. They have been awfully judgy with him. And I think his request to him is hold off judging me until I am finished speaking. Don't be formulating your answer, your response to what I'm saying so that you're not hearing the last 20 verses of a 25-verse answer to you. Listen carefully and listen all the way through. And then after you have listened to everything that I've said, then if I have said things that are worthy of mocking, then you can go ahead and mock those things. The third request is in verse 4. As for me, is my complaint against man, and if it were, why should I not be impatient? I think his point to them there is he is not presenting a personal attack on any human being, including them. They don't have to be so upset at him, so offended by the things that he has said. And that's, that was how Zophar started out. Man, you've offended me in what you've just said. I think Job is answering that statement, and he's saying, what I'm saying is not intended to offend you. I'm not complaining. I'm complaining to you. I'm not complaining about you. And so his hope is that they would understand what his argument, what his complaint really is. And then the fourth thing in verse 5, look at me and be astonished. Put your hand over your mouth. He's saying, just take a close look at what I am going through. Let that astonish you. I think he sees in what he is going through that these men, they really haven't appreciated the depth of misery. Not only physically, I mean, they can see, the boils there and all of that, but the emotional difficulty that he has gone through. They don't seem to be able to appreciate that. And that's what he's asking them to do, is to take a good, hard, honest look at me and see if you can't appreciate more the misery that I am in. And if they do that, then it will cause them to be less offended then by what Job is saying to them. And then in verses 7 through 21, Job presents a different reality than what has been presented to him by his three friends. What he says is, there's an ideal that you have presented. The ideal is the wicked never have any good things in their life. The righteous never have any bad things. He says that's the ideal. Let's look at the reality. When we look around at the world, what do we see? He says in verse 7, why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull breeds without failure, their calves without miscarriage. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They sing to the tambourine and harp, and rejoice to the sound of the flute. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. Yet they say to God, depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. Who is the Almighty, that we should serve him? And so he said, you look around, and what you see is a lot of people who have rejected the sovereignty of God over their lives. And yet you see them not dying in a moment's time. God doesn't bring enemies upon them that overwhelm them and steal their things. God doesn't bring lightning to the earth to kill their crops. God doesn't cause an earthquake to destroy their children. They live, we see these people living to an old age. They have all of these children. They're throwing parties. They're stockpiling wealth. They're dying without misery. The statement has been made already by these men that when you consider the death of the wicked, you see this slow, painful, the kind of death where you go, man, I would not want to die like that. And Job basically says, I don't know what you've been looking at, but it's not the same thing I've been looking at. Because what I've been seeing when I look around is people who live to a ripe old age. They have a swift death. painless death. They are celebrated at their funerals and all these kinds of things. In verses 16 through 21, I think what Job makes an interesting point here, and that is that God could stop this. God doesn't have to let the wicked man dominate the righteous man. He could call an end to the wickedness of the wicked any time that he wanted to. But for some reason, beyond his understanding, God chooses not to do that. And the important thing there is, it is beyond Job's understanding and is beyond the understanding of his friends. God does what he chooses to do. And it is his decision to do it and not man's. And he notes in this passage, let's go ahead and read in verse 17, verse 16 beginning. Indeed, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. Prosperity not in their hand. That is that it's not, their prosperity is in reality not really up to them. It's not necessarily just because they work hard, and all this kind of stuff. God blesses people with prosperity. No matter who they are, whether they're wicked or righteous, if God doesn't want them to have what they have, they will not have it. And so you can't look at this and say that, well, it's totally out of God's hands. It's just in their hands. He said, we understand that's not right. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? How often does their destruction come upon them? The sorrows God distributes in his anger. And the answer to that is not as often as we would think. And certainly not as often as the idealist would think. And not as often as these men have presented to Job. Their point has been, God always does this. And Job says, no, he doesn't. He does what he does because he does it. And we can't understand it. They are like straw before the wind and like chaff that a storm carries away. It's not that they're so strong that God can't take them down. He said, before God, they are like chaff. They're just like straw, easily bent, easily broken. God could just snap his fingers, and the wicked would lose everything that they have, everything that they have built, that they think they find strength in. Okay, so it's not a matter of them being so secure that God can't get at them. At their strongest, he says they're just chaff that the wind can blow away. Now in verse 19 he says, they say God lays up one's iniquity for his children. I think probably the they that he has in mind there in verse 19 is the friends. But it would include likely everybody else that would answer this too. And what they're saying is, yeah, he may get away with it, but maybe God determines that his children are going to pay the price. Once he dies, then God will take it all away from his children as punishment to him. Let him recompense him that he may know it. Let his eyes see his destruction and let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about his household after him when the number of his months is cut in half? It says, does the wicked man, is the fact that his children might have to suffer for his wickedness, do you really think that's something that causes them to hesitate in their wickedness? He's going to go to the grave doing plenty fine. And what he says is, he doesn't know after he's dead, and he doesn't care after he's dead. He's wicked. He doesn't care what happens to his kids. And so this answer that, yeah, they may not suffer in this life, but boy, howdy, their kids will suffer. And Job says, not necessarily. And even if that happens, what do the wicked care? Now, you see this struggle with Job, and you think, man, Job is saying some awfully hard things here about the way things work. He's not saying anything that Asaph, the leader of Israel, didn't say in Psalm chapter 73. Asaph said, as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. He almost lost his faith when he looked around and he saw the prosperity of all of the wicked. And he says the same kind of things here that Job says, It's not like their cattle are all out dying in the field, They got some kind of disease that has just destroyed them all. And you're going, oh, man, what wicked thing did that guy do? It's not like their wives are barren, and all this kind of stuff. And so Asaph sees the same kind of thing. He sees the wicked prospering a lot of times even more than the righteous. And he says, when I thought about that, I just about lost my faith. But then he came to the conclusion in Psalm chapter 73 that the answer to it is to look beyond this life and look to eternity. And he said he went to the house of God. In other words, he went to church. And it reminded him why he was doing the things he was doing in the first place, why he was righteous. It wasn't for the things of this earth. It was for an eternity in heaven. And so Job is making the same kinds of arguments, the same kind of dilemma he is facing here. He asks in verse 22, can anyone teach God knowledge since he judges those on high? The idea of teaching God knowledge here, I believe, means is anyone capable of correcting God, of saying to God, you can't do this. You can't keep the wicked from harm. You can't allow the wicked to persecute the righteous. Can anyone teach God that? No. Why not? Because God is God. One dies in his full strength, being wholly at ease and secure. His pails are full of milk, and the marrow of his bones is moist. Another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, neither having eaten with pleasure, or never having eaten with pleasure. What he says is the same thing that we notice. That is, go down the street where you live, and look at the houses, and look at what's going on, and how blessed people are, and say, okay, that guy's righteous, that guy's unrighteous. This person over here is righteous, his next door neighbor is not. Just totally based on what they have and the lifestyle that they are living. We know you can't do that, and that's what Job is saying here. One man has a pail full of cow's milk, the other is wishing he did, and just pretty much starving to death. He says that tells you nothing about what kind of people they are. It tells you that one is struggling and the other is not, but it doesn't say why. It doesn't say that God has brought this struggle upon one and kept the struggle from the other. And then a couple of verses that are very reminding of what is found in the book of Ecclesiastes. They lie down alike in the dust, and worms cover them. Ecclesiastes 9:2 makes the same point. What happens to all men? They die. Everybody dies. And is the ground any different for one than it is for the other? No. 6 feet under, you're just as dead as the guy next to you who's 6 feet under. And you become pretty much worm food until you are eaten up. It's a discouraging look at death, as far as the body is concerned. I'll tell you what it is reality. People die. Good people die, bad people die, rich people die, poor people die, prominent people die, outcasts die, everybody dies. And death is the great equalizer. That's the point that I think both Job and Solomon and Ecclesiastes are making. Mark.
If it were true that the unrighteous would receive what Job received and the righteous would be greatly blessed, there wouldn't be very many unrighteous people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. This is not heaven. If this were heaven, you'd probably find a whole lot more righteous people, or at least people striving to be righteous, if the reward was here and not in eternity. Verses 22 through 26, we got to. Jesus noted in Matthew 5:45, God causes the sun to shine and the rain to fall on who? Everybody. Ever seen those little showers that come and it's like your neighbor's house gets wet and yours doesn't? It just irritates the fire out of me. But I tell you what I can't do. I can't say, well, because he got rain and I didn't, that must mean he's more righteous than me. Or vice versa, I must be more righteous than him because I got more rain than he did. We understand that. And Job is trying to get his friends to think a little bit differently about this idea of blessing and cursing in this life. That genuine faith is not based on physical rewards in this life. I'll tell you, when you think about it, isn't that what got the argument started in the first place? With Satan's argument against Job with God? Isn't that what got the ball rolling on the book of Job in the first place? Satan says the only reason that Job serves you is because of what he can get out of it. That's not true faith. And what God says in answer to Satan is, no, Job has true faith. And true faith says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And so the very argument that God makes to Satan at the beginning is the argument really that Zophar has made and his friends have made, that Job is answering here, that genuine faith is not a matter of physical rewards in this life. Then verses 27 through 34, look, I know your thoughts and the schemes with which you would wrong me, for you say, where is the house of the prince, and where is the tent, the dwelling place of the wicked? Have you not asked those who travel the road? Do you not know their signs? For the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. They shall be brought out on the day of wrath. Who condemns his way to his face, and who repays him for what he has done? Yet he shall be brought to the grave, and a vigil kept over the tomb. Clods of the valley shall be sweet to him. Everyone shall follow him as countless have gone before him. How then can you comfort me with empty words, since falsehood remains in your answers? And so in verse 27, he starts this section by saying, I know what you're thinking. What you're thinking is, we haven't seen anybody wicked who is prospering like you're describing. You know, name us the names of those people, because we can't think of any names to give. And that may be the case for some of these guys. You know, it's not like they lived in these huge metropolises where they just knew thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Most likely they lived in smaller villages. Maybe they hadn't seen the world. They hadn't seen the way the world works like this. But there were such a things as trade caravans in that day, where people who would come through their village who had been to remote parts of the world. And he says, if you can't think of anybody, just ask somebody on the caravan who's been out there and who has seen how the world works throughout the earth. And they can tell you that there are people out there who are very, very wicked, and yet they are not struggling one bit. Everything seems to be going well for them until they come to the end of their life. And I think his conclusion there in those last couple of verses is that it all basically comes out in eternity. Job knows that the wicked man is going to be brought into judgment, and he's going to give an account for what he has done, whether good or bad. And so he's heard enough of this argument that his friends have made, that it always goes bad for the good, for the bad, always goes good for the good. He says those are empty words that do not comfort. Okay, any comments on that? In chapter 22, we find Eliphaz making his third and final speech. Verses 2 through 4. Can a man be profitable to God though he is wise? Though he who is wise may be profitable to himself? Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that you are righteous? Or is it gain to him that you make your ways blameless? Here's what I think Eliphaz is saying here in answer. He's saying, Job, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that God takes no thought of the wicked man's deeds. You know, that God's kind of aloof from the actions of people, and so he doesn't see the wicked. You can't come to that conclusion unless you also come to the conclusion that God doesn't see the righteous deeds of the good either. You can't have one and not the other. Either God is aloof or God is not aloof. And so is there, you know, Job, are you willing to admit that there is no profit to being righteous? That God doesn't even notice, just like he doesn't notice the wicked man's wickedness, or does God even notice the righteous man's righteousness? And verse 4 is I think a very sarcastic question. Is it because of your fear of him that he corrects you and enters into judgment with you? Job, what are you saying? Are you saying that God is so happy with you that he has killed all your kids and destroyed all your fields and destroyed your health? Is that what you're trying to say? God's so pleased with you that he's brought this misery on you? Doesn't make any sense. But here's the thing, when you think about it, that is exactly what's happening, in a sense. Why is Job suffering? Because Job has been singled out as a righteous man. And so the question that Eliphaz is asking here, that he believes the rhetorical answer to is no, in this situation is actually, yeah, that's kind of what's happening. Job's righteous, and so this misery has been brought upon him. Verses 5 through 11, Eliphaz gives specific instances of what Job has done, what he believes Job has done. Is not your wickedness great and your iniquity without end? For you have taken pledges from your brother for no reason and stripped the naked of their clothing. You've not given the weary water to drink. You have withheld bread from the hungry. But the mighty man possessed the land, and the honorable man dwelt in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of the fatherless was crushed. Therefore snares are all around you, and sudden fear troubles you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and an abundance of water covers you. Job, here's the problem. You have mistreated poor people. And I mean, you have been so stingy with the things that you have, you won't even give a man dying of thirst a cup of water. Didn't think much of their friend, did they? And again, we see the principles that these people understood about coming to the aid of those who needed aid. And what they're saying is that's a principle established by God, and you have not only violated not coming to their aid, you've taken advantage of them in their weakness. And in verses 12 through 20, Job basically says, if you think that you're going to get away with this, if you think that you're going to escape God's notice and God's wrath, then you just better start thinking again. Is not God in the height of heaven, and see the highest stars, how lofty they are? Don't you realize where God is? God's up in heaven, and don't you realize what He's doing? He's looking down upon us. It seems almost as if Zophar took the argument that what Job is saying here is that God He doesn't even look down. And Job's not saying that. Job understands that God sees. He's going to make that point. What he doesn't understand is why God doesn't do something about it. But it appears that his friend has come to the conclusion that Job is just saying that God doesn't look at all. He doesn't care about us at all. He says that's not true. God's up in heaven is God, and God is looking down. And the result of your saying that God doesn't look is you think you're hiding from God, that your sin is hidden from Him. It's not, verse 13, and you say, what does God know? Can He judge through the deep darkness? Thick clouds cover Him so that He cannot see? And He walks above the circle of the heaven. Are you saying that God can't see through the clouds? You can commit sins on a cloudy day and God can't see what you're doing? You think you're hiding what you have done from God? And what he says in verses 13 through 15 is Job is just following the well-worn path of the wicked. What he's accusing Job here of is something that he says is the typical way of the wicked. They believe that they can hide their sins from God. The fact of the matter is, you can't. Let's see where are we down to. Let's go verse 19 and 20. The righteous see it and are glad, and the innocent laugh at them. Surely our adversaries are cut down, and the fire consumes their remnant. He says this is the reaction of the righteous to the fact that God does see and God does punish. The righteous are going to see that punishment of the wicked, and they are going to be filled with joy that God has redeemed His people from what appears to be this great inequality. God has brought the wickedness of the wicked upon themselves, and people are happy about that because it is only right that God would do that. Okay, we'll pick up at verse 21 next week, and we'll see that I think Job's response to Eliphaz's argument that this would be easy to get over. You want to quit the suffering? It's easy to do. Job's going to say that may not be the case. It may be a lot more difficult for me to get through this than you guys are telling me it is. Because God does what God does, and we have no say-so in it. And it's beyond our understanding and beyond our ability to change. That'll be as we start next week. Thanks for being here tonight. If you would bow with me, we'll go to God in prayer and be dismissed. Our gracious Father, we're thankful for the day, for the blessings of life that you have so bountifully bestowed upon us. We thank you, Father, for this opportunity that we've had to come together here and to be a source of strength and encouragement to one another as we have studied your word together and sung songs of praise to you, and as we have offered our prayers together. We pray, Father, that all has been pleasing to you and that we have gained some much needed encouragement from the things that we have studied tonight, the things we've sung about, and the prayers that we have offered. Pray that you would be with those who need your blessings in special ways, with Courtney and with others who are suffering through these illnesses at this time, and for those who for a long time have been suffering. We pray that you would watch over all of them and help them to know that you understand what they are going through and that you are with them through that. Bless us and keep us in your care is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.